Okay, oops. Over. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the second, that's right, the second episode of Praxis Run. For people that may not know what Praxis Run is a podcast dedicated to understanding how and why people get involved in activism in order to put their theory into practical application, otherwise known as Praxis. Today, we are joined by K Fellows. K Fellows identifies as an ethical life activist dedicated to protecting human life from beginning to end and creating a culture that values humanity first. She is the co-founder of Protecting Life Through Ethical Accountability, otherwise known as PLEA, an ethical life organization dedicated to accountability and pro-life activism and promoting a whole life approach in the pro-life movement. You've likely seen her making the rounds on various debates in the debate circuits, from showing up on panels and the like, as well as modern day debates. So everybody, let's welcome K Fellows. Kelly Fellows, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Great. So you and I have been on a few panels before, but I'm sure that some of the people that are in my audience that might listen to this podcast later, probably because they come more from like the Facebook side of the house and not necessarily like really integrated into Twitch community or the YouTube community for that matter, might not know much about you other than what I just said and maybe some of the debates that they've seen you in on other people's programs. So why don't you go ahead and describe yourself a little bit about this so people can get to know you a bit better?
So I am what people call an ethical life activist. I got started in politics about 8 years ago through pro-life activism, and have kind of moved my way through a number of political and social issues over the years. I am a pagan, a practicing witch. I identify as a leftist. I also am a wife. I've been married for 7 years. I have 2 kids. My son is 5. My daughter's 4. They pretty much run my life, but that's me.
Okay, cool. So I know there's a lot of people that are probably going to be scratching their heads at that of like you're pro-life, but you're on the left. That doesn't really jive with a lot of people, and that was honestly one of the reasons why we wanted to interview you specifically, because it, to put it all out there is like we want to understand why people kind of do what they do and what's motivated them towards activism and towards whatever it is that they're practicing, with the explicit intent of like trying to bridge political divides. As a pro-life activist from the left, that kind of like your jam to a degree, right? So how did you come about your pro-life activism? Like, what was the motivating factor that got you into being pro-life rather than pro-choice?
Well, I started in pro-life activism before I got started in any other activism. This
Okay.
like being pro-life is kind of what launched me into being an activist, and it was actually through personal experience. I grew up in fundamental evangelicalism, so I was
Okay.
always taught that you are pro-life, like that is the only option that you
Sure.
have. We didn't talk about abortion. We didn't talk about much of anything in regards to the conversation surrounding abortion. It was just pretty much like, you don't need to know what abortion is, just know that it's wrong, you don't do it.
Mm.
But then, of course, as most teenagers do, I went through a rebellious period, and all my other friends were also going through the rebellious period, and this is when kind of the conversation about, pro-life versus pro-choice really kind of started to become a thing that younger people were interested in. It wasn't just something that was discussed, amongst politicians and around,
Gotcha.
adult dinner tables. And so we all identified as pro-choice at that time, even though we had no idea what that meant. And then I had a personal experience. I had a pregnancy scare, and just in conversations that I had with the potential father of that child, really led me into doing my own research on what abortion was and what took place during an abortion procedure, and that's what made me initially pro-life. And then I started finding facets on the internet, mostly on Instagram at the time, of different people that were also pro-life, and getting more education from other people that had been in this conversation longer than I had, and that kind of propelled me into eventually becoming an activist myself.
Okay. So you said at sort of the beginning here, you said that you grew up evangelical, and then you had your like little rebellious phase, and then you kind of were brought back due to a personal experience on being pro-life again. If somebody wanted to, if somebody was looking down like the same path that you went down for this, where would you say they should actually start with their research? Because there's a lot of misinformation online about everything, and this like my whole thing, like people are like, well, you could always Google. I'm like, no, don't tell people to just Google it, because you don't know where their biases are going to lead them. So that would be like one of my questions about that. Like, where did you start with it, and should people start in the same way, or do you have like other resources?
I actually like where I got started in my research with the abortion topic, because whenever I initially went looking for it, I wasn't looking for, pro-life versus pro-choice information. I was looking for something that I can be like, this is like a medical textbook. I checked out a lot of medical and embryology
Hmm.
textbooks from my library. But the internet is a great source if you know what you're looking for. I think that, if you're going to go to Google Scholar. There are excellent resources, but you need to check to make sure where those resources are coming from and making sure that they're not biased. The Mayo Clinic is a very, very objective source.
Okay.
NCBI, these are sources that you can say this is an objective source that is coming from a purely unbiased standpoint. I think everybody should get their start in researching abortion from a purely medical standpoint that's completely objective.
No, I think that's fair, because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is, or if you think I'm wrong, I should say, this is a very emotionally charged topic for everyone. And we'll get into that later, because I'm sure you have thoughts, but when the draft opinion for Roe v. Wade, the taking down of Roe v. Wade, came out from the Supreme Court leak, I know a lot of people that they were devastated by that. They were like, we fought all this time to have bodily autonomy, and they're just going to take it away from us, and there's nothing we can do. So it was just devastating to them. And then at the same time, I understand people maybe more along your lines, or from the evangelical perspective, that to them this is like a huge victory. And one of those things, like when it's this emotionally charged, I think bridging any kind of divide is going to be very fraught. So what you said with starting with just the raw medical side of the house of it might be good for some people, but I know that for most people it's just this huge emotional and moral/ethical question for them. So while I agree with you that go get the research from the medical side of the house, there's really this giant gaping question about the morality of it. And you started, as you said, as on the evangelical side of the house, then went pro choice, and then went back to pro life. What would you say was the conversion point for you in that kind of arc?
Conversion as far as like my beliefs about abortion.
Yeah, when you were pro-choice, you said you didn't really know a lot when you were pro-choice, but there had to have been some sort of impetus about what you researched that said, okay, I am definitely pro-life when it comes to the abortion issue. And I assume you're pro-life, you're like anti-death penalty as well, and other things like that. That's not a lot of things where other people are, but I know that you are specifically. But what was it that you researched that bridge that this is the medical question, and this is why the moral implications of this should bring me or anyone to being pro-life?
For me, the flip switch moment for me was I had been doing a lot of research about embryonic and fetal development. I am one of 16 kids. I've seen my mom go through a lot of pregnancies. And so pregnancy wasn't something that was a new topic to me,
Okay.
but learning exactly what happens from week to week to week throughout a pregnancy was something that
Mm,
had always fascinated me. And being that I was homeschooled, I was able to learn that kind of on my own through the last years of high school.
okay.
Um, but I was specifically researching two things at the same time. I was researching very specific times in embryonic and fetal development, and then began to research the abortion procedure that happened during that gestational period. And I was
Okay.
researching a what would be a late first trimester into early second trimester abortion. And for me, it was just that moment and realizing what takes place during this procedure that inevitably ended up changing my mind on the situation and on the issue.
Okay. So you would say it was mainly the learning the quote unquote realities of how the procedure is actually done that pushed you over the edge, so to
Yeah,
speak.
essentially,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I think that's fair. I think that's from some of the people that I've talked to previously, it seems to be kind of their their take as it as well. Um, so with the switch, right? You said that it was pro-life. Being pro-life is what brought you into activism. You didn't start with activism and then getting into pro-life. When, like, how old were you when you started to actually, you know, get more politically engaged with this particular topic? And how?
Well,
And go ahead. I'll let you answer, and I'll follow up.
Well, it was, it was kind of one of those things where I never really had a lot of interest in politics, but
Mhm.
because of how politicized the abortion topic is, it's kind
Mhm.
of one of those inevitable things that you fall into. And I got my start back in 2014. I was 19 years old, and this was right before Donald Trump ran for president. It was
Right.
very, very hard to be apolitical in that climate and
Mhm.
be a pro-life activist. And so for me, it was just kind of something that I've had a very much love-hate relationship with. I've been doing this for 8 years, and I've never gotten to a point in my activism it's like, I really, really enjoy political activism. I still hate it. It was something that I just kinda got dragged into in doing my activism with being pro-life that I
Uh-huh.
just I couldn't get away from.
Sure. Sure. No, that makes a ton of sense. So what with the pro-life activism itself, we'll get into how you became more politically aware or engaged in a little bit. With the pro-life activism itself, what was like one of the first things that you did as a pro-life activist? And at the time you were pro-life, like were you still like apolitical, or were you like politically left leaning, politically right leaning at the time? Just so we can have a little bit of background on that too.
I think that back then, because I had just moved out of my parents' house. I had
Okay.
lived 19 years in, fundamental Christianity. And so, that growing up in that environment, it's very cult-like, and it
Sure.
shapes every opinion that you have. You're told what your opinions you hold from a very, very young age. And I was just at the very, very beginning of kind of like my own deconstruction journey of figuring out what my personal beliefs were. And over the course of the 8 years that I've been doing activism, my pro-life activism and my political activism and my stances on a number of social issues, including my religious beliefs, have
Mhm.
all kind of shifted and
Sure.
changed each other in like this intertwining journey that I've been on for a very, very long time. Whenever I first started in political activism, the first thing that I did whenever I became a pro-life activist was I started one of those activist Instagram pages. Um, I had my activist Instagram page, and I identified as like exactly what you would stereotype a pro-life activist to be. I was a very traditional Republican, conservative Christian girl, very much fit the aesthetic to a T.
So
Um,
so trad wife vibes, huh?
I was giving major trad wife vibes.
Okay, that's fair. So at some point, right, you switched from being, you know, more conservative. Well, we'll just say conservative, to being progressive, leftist. Like, I don't know your economic stances, so I don't want to like label you, but obviously, doing kind of a little bit of a 180, except on this one issue. What brought that on? Because that's interesting to me too.
I love whenever people ask me this question because in reality, my pro-life activism is what has driven me further left politically. It's
Mhm.
seeing
Okay.
this all of these holes that need to be filled in society and creating, like you said in my intro, truly wanting to create a culture that values humanity and human beings over everything else. And for me, as I've adopted more of a, pro-life for the whole life stance, that has caused me to move left politically and seeing that, I don't have a lot of faith in the American government. I certainly don't believe that politicians overwhelmingly care about people living or
For
dying
sure.
or having
Right.
decent quality of life. But I knew that on the right, I could see that politicians that were claiming to care so much about life were actively fighting policies that were going to make life better for the children that they didn't want to see die in abortion. And
Mm,
I came to a point where I was so tired of the level of apathy that I was seeing from other people that were claiming to be pro-life. And as much as I struggled, I struggled through a couple years of libertarianism because of my mistrust for the government, and I eventually kind of just tumbled out onto the other side of this very, very long and stressful journey with politics, and I still hate
right.
politics, but seeing that as a leftist, you can you can push and value just treating other people with human dignity and respect and wanting them to have the best quality of life that they can have.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and it really is interesting to me that a lot of we'll say evangelicals aren't more progressive when it comes to their economic policies. You have a lot of Catholics that are pro-life, and they're pro-life like to a T. They're like anti-death penalty, anti-abortion. Um, they don't like long prison sentences for people. They believe in restorative justice. They're very much like the welfare state needs to exist. It's a necessity as driven us by God. But you don't see that so much, at least from what I've experienced on the evangelical side. And with what you had just said, your journey taking you from conservative to libertarian to progressive economically because of all that makes a ton of sense. Was there was there anything else? Like, was there like one moment that you could think of that was really like, okay, I'm done with these libertarians or these conservatives, like they are not making any more sense to me. Like, so, did something happen? Like, what's up with that?
Throughout all of the years that I've been doing activism in all of its various facets, I feel like my journey from right to left has just been a series of those moments to where like it's just like I get to a point where I just can't anymore. I can't make
Mm,
excuses for it. I can't justify it anymore. I came very, very dangerously close in my pro-life activism at the very, very beginning back in like 2015, very dangerously close to falling down the alt-right pipeline because of the other pro-life people that I had surrounded myself with in this
gotcha.
ideology that had become so incredibly toxic. Thankfully, I found an organization that is, they call themselves the Consistent Life Ethic Organization. They, do a lot of work against, fighting for death row inmates. They do a lot of activism trying to close Guantanamo Bay, and that was my first introduction
Okay.
into more progressive pro-life activism, and that is what pulled me back from the edge of that alt-right pipeline and really started to open my eyes of seeing other people, even the people that I disagreed with a lot
Sure.
more empathy and compassion. And whenever you start to view other human beings this way, it becomes incredibly apparent whenever you are surrounded by people that do not view other human beings that way. And so for me, it was the apathy and it was the condescension and it was private comments that I would see other people making about post-abortive women, people in the LGBTQ plus community. And this very, very small group of progressive pro-lifers were initially what gave me the courage to come out publicly to my very,
Mm,
very conservative base at the time, and I received a lot of hate. I lost at the
right.
time, I had about 6,000 followers on my tiny little Instagram page that dropped to below 3,000, in the matter of hours of me coming out publicly, and for me, it was just like, why am I fighting so hard to identify and be a part of a community that doesn't truly want me for who I am? And that
Right.
kind of pushed me out of traditional conservative Republican circles and more into, moderate right-leaning circles where I started to rub shoulders with libertarians. And I was like, maybe
Mhm.
I have more of a place here. You know, they're kind of like, come as you are. We don't really care. We just hate the government.
Sure.
And for me, I think I identified as a libertarian for about 2 years. And my like final moment of just like I'm done, I can't anymore was the day that we pulled out of Afghanistan and seeing
Oh, really? That
how much, yes, seeing how much apathy, seeing how much these people just did not care that there were people dying, that there were children and women dying in mass. They did not care. And I was just like, I can't be a part of a political party, a political community that cares so little about other human beings. And I had had, you know, minor issues with
uh-huh.
libertarians in the past, you know, talking about things like healthcare and how we make the free market work for everybody and how they, again, just apathy. Like, yeah, some people are going to fall through the cracks and some people are going to die because they're not going to be able to have healthcare. Like, there were little moments, but in that exact moment, just seeing it all over my social media pages, just so many people that I had once held so much respect for, just being like,
Right.
so incredibly apathetic to human beings dying because it didn't affect them. I was like, I can't be a part of these communities anymore. I need a community of people
Sure.
that at least pretend or put on airs of pretending to care about other people.
Yeah. No, that's I didn't realize it was that recent for you. Honestly, like I knew, like, because we met on Tom Fullery's program. God, was it 2 years ago at this point? It was a pretty long time ago now, but I thought that you were at that time you were pretty left. What was I wrong about that read, or?
I had a lot of like my social views as far as, you know, the LGBTQ plus
Sure.
community, gay rights, and like I said, all throughout my time of identifying as a libertarian, I really, really struggled with the healthcare thing. It was like, I
Okay.
think that people shouldn't be dying from lack of access to healthcare, and libertarians were always, you know, like they talk a really big game, but if you sit down with them long enough and have that
Mhm.
conversation, like they could never give me the answers to questions that I was having. And so I was at that point, even as whenever I was identifying as a libertarian, a lot of my social views had already made a lot of leaps and bounds left, especially
Okay.
considering that I was kind of moving from the right.
Right. Of course. Okay. Yeah. I had so I don't know if I was ever really libertarian, but there was a point in my life when I think probably about as well. Let's see. You were 19, 2014. I was 24, right? Yes. Yes. 24. No, wait. No. God, I can't math today. Hold up.
I can't math
Oh, this is
ever.
boring.
So
This is embarrassing. I was 29. Okay. I was like 24. That doesn't sound right. Like, no, I was 29. So I think, yeah, probably around your time frame here is when I stopped saying I was quote unquote libertarian. And it was different than yours. And it could be because of geography, where, because I don't know where you live, but at the time I was in Indiana. And Indiana's libertarians were a bit more conservative than you would get in like New Hampshire, like socially speaking as well, than you would get in, say, someplace like New Hampshire or California. And it was during Obama's first year where Tea Party people started showing up to libertarian meetings and trying to recruit the libertarians there. And it was working. And I'm like, there's a little something fishy here. So that was my experience. I don't know if you experienced anything similar to that, but it maybe around the same age range for that. So
yeah, I
but yes.
definitely saw it. I definitely saw it. There was, there was a faction of the Libertarian Party, the Austin Peterson stands,
Mhm.
that it was like you're like MAGA light, basically. Like you don't get into the culty stuff, but you still kiss Trump's ass quite a bit.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, you're an embarrassed conservative. I get it. Okay. I'm glad I'm not the only one that like saw this trajectory in real time. So that's very, very good to know. Independent Thought is watching us over on Twitch, and he says that he is honestly fascinated by this conversation, and that is why we do it at Crowdsource Politics, soon to be rebranded as something else. We have the name. I don't have what is it here? I don't have the image to replace this yet, so that's why it's not done yet. But that's why we're doing this, because these conversations, I believe, is what we actually really need in order to tap down on some of the vitriol that we're experiencing in our politics and try to get synthesis. If anybody that is a Hegel stan knows what that is, basically finding how we can come up to a new status quo that is good for everybody out of the dialectic. So that's why we're doing this here. So I'm glad that you're joining us and watching Independent Thought. You're a good person, and anybody that's watching this, go follow Independent Thought. He makes really good content as well. So please go ahead and check him out. Now, so one of the interesting things is that we see among evangelicals is that they claim to be pro-life, and yet they're also pro-death penalty. And as we said previously, they're not on it with the social welfare programs. Catch-all, we'll say the social welfare programs. Seeing how as you transitioned from conservative all the way down to left economically, and pro-life was the impetus for this, how would you say somebody that might be either going through the same trajectory or somebody that is on the left should approach conservatives with their economic agenda in order to try to either change minds, or is that even possible if they're not part of the in-group? What are your take on that?
I don't think that it's impossible. I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all for everybody who is conservative. My co-founder over at PLEA Justice, she is a conservative Republican. We are absolute polar opposites, and we work together perfectly. Like, she is the other side of my body. Would not be able to run our organization without her. And she's very, very supportive and 100% in favor of, our ethical life stance of being pro-life for the whole life. She supports, the welfare program. She supports paid maternity leave. I do think that there are people that identify as conservatives, that vote Republican, that are on the right, that you can have these conversations with. I think that they are unfortunately the minority. And I do think that these people, you can reach them with just coming to them, reaching out for that compassion and empathy, because people like this genuinely do have it. My co-founder, she's for paid maternity leave because she knows that it's going to bring down the abortion rate, but it's also going to give quality of life to that child and to that mother.
Sure.
These are people that genuinely have a heart for people. We disagree on how to get to where we need to be sometimes, but they are truly empathetic. And I think that it's very, very easy to tell very, very early on in a conversation with someone if they have that level of compassion and empathy for other people, and if you're going to be able to have a productive conversation with them.
I kind of agree with that. So when I try to approach people to either have conversations like this or to like bridge political divides or what have you, whatever it is that I'm doing, I always try to come at it with good faith and a calm demeanor, because you get more flies with honey than you do with shit. If you treat somebody like shit, if you come out hot at the gate, they're going to ignore everything you say. Shout out to leftists that do that. Stop it. All right. Now, so one of the things that, and you can correct me, no, you can say if this is a good approach or not, is always like, I know that we're not going to agree on like a particular thing. So if I were to approach somebody like this and be like, hey, maybe we should, get some welfare going to stop abortion. And then if they say, well, are you pro-choice? And if I say yes, they're going to ignore me. Right. So I try to like just ignore that question entirely. I'm like, look, we're not going to agree on everything. Let's try to find out what we can agree on. I want to know your policies. I want to know what it is that you dislike. What's your number one issue? If your number one issue is something like that, fine, we can't have a conversation. Do you think that is a good approach?
I do, because, it's something that, I'm relatively new to, debating. I haven't been doing it for very long, just a couple of years, but I've had a lot of abortion debates. And a common theme that I always see is I get to the end of these conversations, and something that I'm always told is, thank you for just being civil with me. Thank you for not yelling at me. Thank you for not being condescending to me.
Yeah.
We have become so incredibly polarized in society on every single issue. And unfortunately, debates has become more of a blood sports thing than having like a decent conversation thing. And so whenever people genuinely want to have these conversations and they're
Mhm.
genuinely interested in hearing other opinions and maybe meeting on some middle ground, like they're just thankful that you're being respectful to them because they're so
Sure.
used to being treated so horribly because they have differing opinions.
Yeah.
And as someone who has both received civility and given civility and been appreciated for that, I think that this is absolutely an approach that we should always be pushing on people. If you wanna have these conversations, then just approach these people that you disagree with the same dignity and respect that you would want them to show to you.
Sure. Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. Now, one thing that I might not agree with is doing it every time because there's some opinions that are just like, no, bro, like you're Nazi, go away. Like we all been there, right? Or
We don't debate
for
Nazis.
yeah. For somebody that might be on the political right, you're not going to want to listen to anything a communist says, right? I get it. All right. That doesn't mean you treat them like crap, but it does mean that you bring the heat a little bit. You make it a little thicker. All right. You turn up the temperature just a little bit.
What I
But
will
that's
say though is, like, you might know something you might know so many things about someone
yeah.
and think that a conversation with them is going to go one way. Give it just a little bit of, like just give it a little bit of
Oh
time
yes.
before you bring that heat on because let me tell you, I debated abortion with Richard Spencer a couple weeks ago, and everybody's
What?
like, "Oh, you've gotta go in there and you've gotta just talk shit. You gotta call him a Nazi douchebag, you gotta call him a wife beater, you gotta call him all these things. I want you to make him cry." And I'm like, I'm not gonna do that." And we sat there on Modern Day Debate for over an hour, and we had a very, very decent and very, very productive conversation. I thought that it went super, super well, and people were
Right.
really, really mad at me after that debate because I wasn't mean to him.
Sure. I mean, because he's a Nazi, but I mean, I get it, but I mean, at the same time, that's not what every single debate like this is for, right? So one of the things that I like to tell people a lot is like a lot of people that are engaged in this space are first and foremost political actors. They're not trying to be in good faith. They're trying to win a position and turn the audience to their favor, right? Would you say that I'm wrong?
Oh, no, absolutely,
Okay.
100%.
So really what you're doing is you're playing to the audience, not necessarily your audience, because if you're trying to change minds, you're trying to get people that are on the fence to your side. Sometimes that means bringing the heat a little bit. But more often than not, you're going to find that you're going to bring more people to your side if you make them be the ones that are going against you in that manner, because nobody likes a bully. Well, some people do, but vast majority of people that are going to consume content such as this aren't going to want to see a bully. They're not going to want to see somebody to just like go in and just dunk after dunk after dunk every single time. Like the people in the middle are just like, oh, that was fun and entertaining, but you didn't change my mind because you didn't say anything of substance, right? Is that
Yeah.
kind of the approach you take? Like I've seen your debates, but like for our audience.
Yeah, that's definitely the approach that I would rather take. Like, if you're going to come in and you're going to, people are like, "What if he starts, spewing Nazi talking points?" Which he did.
Of course you did. Yeah.
He definitely exposed that he's very much in favor of eugenics. He flat out said
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. He
And it gave
wants black people to get abortions and not
yeah,
anybody else. Yeah.
yeah, like only rich, white, wealthy people that don't have any cognitive disabilities in their
Right.
family at all, like only they should be breeding. But I was able to, counter those arguments. We were able to have a conversation about why those arguments are not good.
Right.
Um, but if somebody's going to come at me and be rude and not want to have a productive conversation with me and just waste the time at just trying to upset me and throw blows at me, I'm going to let them behave that way. I'm not going to
Sure.
respond to it. I'm not going to react to it. And I'm not going to get down to their level because at what point does it benefit me to do that? That's not what I came to the debate stands to do. I came to have a conversation and maybe educate
Yeah.
people on my stance and on your stance. If you don't want to do that, then I have nothing to give to this
Yeah.
conversation. And I'll let you have your little moment and then I will quietly exit because I have nothing to gain from lowering myself to your level.
No, for sure, for sure. Like, I like I said, I'm a time and a place for everything kind of person, but I mostly agree with you on a lot of these things. Not the abortion stuff, but like the way to approach it. So one of the other primary purpose of this program is to understand how people can do praxis, right? And so you are the co-founder of Protecting Life Through Ethical Accountability. How? Like, just how did this come to be? What are some of like the lessons you can impart to other people? And you don't have to make it necessarily about the organization itself if you want to just talk in generalities, but go ahead and talk about your organization too. I'm good with it, and then we can go from there.
So we founded PLEA back in November of last year. We're very, very new. We're still very much getting our footing. But it came out of a situation regarding Abby Johnson. And for those who are watching that may not know who Abby Johnson is, she is a very, very well-known figure in the pro-life movement. She got her start back in 2009, I believe. She's the woman that used to work at Planned Parenthood, left Planned Parenthood after seeing an ultrasound. She's got a movie. She's got several books. She does all kind. She was at the January 6th insurrection. She's all
Mm.
over the place. And she's not a good person. And in November of last year, she used her very, very large platform, given to her by the pro-life movement, to attack a fellow pro-life activist who is also a rape survivor. Her name is
Oh
Jennifer
wow.
Christie. She got started in the pro-life movement after her story of a horrible and a brutal rape that she experienced that resulted in conceiving her son. And talking about how, that journey was, and her husband keeping the baby, raising the baby, and she has a beautiful little boy now. And her story is very, very powerful. And of course, pro-life movement picked it up and ran with it. You can read it on Live Action's page still. That's one of the few places you can still find it, because unfortunately, after Abby Johnson used her very, very large platform to slander this rape victim, giving absolutely no evidence whatsoever for any of the things that she was accusing her of, which was
Wow.
basically that she was lying about her rape. Um,
Of
uh,
course.
of the majority of pro-life people, organizations, individual activists completely pulled their support from Jennifer. They removed her story from all of their platforms, completely turned their back on her, and there was absolutely no evidence to support that any of this happened. She was on suicide watch for over a week. Still has bouts with very, very severe depression because of this. Just a couple days ago, another hit piece came out, again, having absolutely no evidence for anything that they were saying, just perpetuating lies. Turning Point USA platformed Abby Johnson back in December, I believe, on their huge platform. Alex Clark put her on her podcast to millions of people to spread these lies even further. It was a horrible, horrible situation. And so me and my friend Marissa, we actually met through this situation. We're like, there's something has to be done about this. This can't be allowed to happen. She can't just do this to another human being and go about her life raking in millions upon millions of dollars from the pro-life movement and have absolutely no accountability for what she did. And so we started a social media campaign. We were trying to get as many people to see this as possible. Didn't receive a lot of love and support from the pro-life community. None of it. Not the
Right.
conservative right, not the progressive left. Nobody wanted to be a part of trying to get justice for Jennifer. And throughout conversations that we had with what you might consider leaders in the pro-life movement, and seeing just one by one all of them be like, we don't want to be a part of this. We got together, our small little group of 4 people, and we're like, there's a hole here. There's a hole in pro-life activism that needs to be filled, because this isn't pro-life. This is
No.
simply anti-abortion. They do not care about people. You cannot pretend that you care about other people. You can't pretend that you care about mothers. You can't pretend that you care about rape victims whenever you're willing to throw them under the bus just to not make waves in the pro-life movement, and not to maybe mess up possibly any of that donation money that you have coming in for your organization. And so through all of that, we launched Protecting Life Through Ethical Accountability. And at first, it was just, we're dedicated to making sure that whenever members of the pro-life community act in ways that are unethical, we're going to
Sure.
be there to call it out. And we're going to be
Okay.
there to make sure that people see it. And at first, that was kind of just what we wanted to do. We kind of want to just be this beacon of like, you need to kind of stay into these parameters. Like, if you're going to hold yourself to a higher moral standard, pro-lifers claim to have the moral high ground in being pro-life. Well, hold yourself to that standard. in everything that you're doing, or don't
Yeah.
pretend to have that moral high ground. Um, we have very much evolved as an organization in the short time that we've been active, because we've realized that the pro-life movement overwhelmingly does not care about people. And so that's why we now label ourselves as an ethical life organization. We are not pro-life. We are ethical life activists, because we do truly care about people. And it's not just about being against abortion. It's about supporting pregnant people. It's about supporting families. It's about supporting these children after they're born. It's about
Right.
being inclusive and understanding. And you don't have to agree with everybody's lifestyle, but you do have to treat other people with dignity and respect. And we've kind of branched away from identifying with the pro-life movement, while also being like, this is what's happening in pro-life activism, and you need to be aware of it. You need to be aware of the people that you are supporting, that you're donating your hard-earned money to.
No, yeah, that was a I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have not heard about this at all. I'm sure this is something that in the pro life circles, this is like all over the place. I'm not in a pro life circle, so I'm not gonna. I don't. It didn't come across my feed. Okay, and like independent thought said, like that's just it's just all around horrible. And it, the pro life movement for a lot of things are trying to get rid of the stigma that they're really anti-woman. And from what you just told me, I know nothing else about this. So I'm going to do my research later. Maybe I will cover it. It really seems like this is like a what should be a turning point or an aha moment for a lot of people, and saying, no, they're just anti, like, if not anti-woman, just like pro-birth, right? Like at the very least, if you want to be charitable. You just said your piece on that. Like, is that a fair assessment about what you experienced here with this?
Absolutely, and it was absolutely soul crushing. I mean, I know I've had several people accuse me of lying about this or blowing it out of proportion. I don't think people understand how absolutely heart-wrenching and soul-crushing this was for me. I had
Sure.
just started with a brand new organization whenever this happened. I'd only been doing it for a few months. I had really found my niche in progressive activism that was also pro-life. I had felt like I had found my
Mm-hmm.
people, and then this happened, and it lit a fire under my ass. I was so angry, and I was so hurt, and I was so driven and passionate about getting justice for this woman that I didn't
Sure.
even know. I had seen enough of the evidence to know that what had happened to her was so incredibly unfair and wrong and
Sure.
horrifyingly awful. And to see the people that I was so passionate about working with and I had so much hope for, I had to separate myself from that and pull away from it, and it was absolutely gut-wrenching for me. But at the end of the day, it was like,
Mm-hmm.
this is where I need to be, and I'm not going to sacrifice my moral stance on where I
Right.
feel like I need to be standing. And I feel like that's what everybody else around me did, and it was horrifying, it was awful, and it was so hard to watch, and it really does it's very eye-opening. It's one of those incredibly
Mm-hmm.
eye-opening moments.
Okay. Yeah, that's like I said, it's terrible story, and I feel. Can you say the woman's name again? I'm sorry.
Her name is Jennifer Christie. Her organization was called Love Louder. They had to shutter their organization. It was an incredible organization dedicated to
Mm,
helping other rape survivors who found themselves pregnant.
right.
If they wanted to have, just giving them emotional support to carry
Right.
through their pregnancies. And Jennifer is an absolutely incredible woman. She had a book coming out talking about her story and her journey, and unfortunately, because of what Abby Johnson did, Focus on the Family pulled her book deal. We are hoping that
Of course.
eventually she is able to get another publisher, because I've only read part of it, but it is absolutely incredible thing. As a sexual
Right.
assault survivor myself, it really spoke to me, and I think that regardless of your stance on abortion, her book would have been an absolute amazing resource for assault survivors. And she's an incredible person. You can't find a whole bunch about her on the internet. There are a few videos of her speeches that you can still find on the crevices of YouTube. But the pro-life movement pumped her for content, and then
Of
they threw
course.
her in the trash, basically. It's really sad. And all the higher ups, all the well-known people in pro-life activism, all the big names that you think of whenever you think of pro-life activism, they knew that this was happening and they chose not to do anything about it.
Fucking devastating, man. That's rough. Yeah. Okay. And I hate to continue on because that's a lot. That's a lot to
I know
process.
it's hard. It's hard. It's really hard. I tell people this story because unfortunately I don't have the platform to get this into nearly as many eyes as Abby Johnson does. And I tell people this story and they're like, it's like they can't even believe that something like this is real. It sounds like a bad movie plot.
I 100% like there's no reason for me to distrust because knowing what I'm terrible with names. So the woman that sparked Roe v. Wade, she got used by both sides of the abortion debate as well. First by feminists, and she didn't meet that mold of, at the time, we'll say upper crust feminist. Oh, thanks for the follow, whoever did that. Just heard it. But yeah, okay. But then the pro-life people did the same thing after, basically it sputtered out. And it's just, it doesn't surprise me at all, but it's still very hard to hear. So now, what is one of like the key lessons you've learned by starting this organization? You said you've gone through a couple of iterations already. Like how many iterations would you say for your mission's gone through?
I think that really we've had like 2 big changes. Like whenever we first launched, our page was just called Exposing Abby Johnson. We were very, very dedicated. Like we were going to let people know what this woman had done and all of the people that she had hurt and the pain that she had inflicted. And then we started getting hundreds upon hundreds of messages from people like, you need to look into this person. I worked for this organization and it was horrible, abusive environment. This person said this to me. This person did this. And we're just like, oh my God, like it's never ending. Like there's so much. There's so many horrible things that we were hearing about different organizations and different leaders in the pro-life movement and all of these horrible things that were happening around us that we weren't even aware of. And so we changed our name. We worked very, very hard trying to figure out a name that kind of encompassed what we wanted to represent. And we wanted to represent the highest level of ethical, moral standards for pro-life activists. And that's how we came up with protecting life through ethical accountability. We are still very, very dedicated to, our anti-abortion stance, but we're not going to achieve ridding the United States of abortion by sacrificing rape victims, by sacrificing teen activists, by sacrificing our moral standards on what is and is not okay to do to other human beings. And whenever we saw that we weren't getting through, we weren't making headway whatsoever with the pro-life movement, big name organizations didn't want to talk to us, have anything to do with us. Smaller organizations didn't want to have anything to do with us because they need the donation money that comes from big name conservatives in order to keep their organizations running. And we're just like, at this point, what is the point of us trying to be representation for the pro-life movement? They don't want our representation. They don't want us cleaning up their messes and being kind of a better face for the pro-life movement. So why are we wasting our time whenever we can be over here doing our own thing, doing our own mission, promoting our own ideals as in regards to pro-life activism and what it actually means to be pro-life? And so we changed all of our bios. We're like, we're an ethical life organization. We do not represent the pro-life movement, and the pro-life movement does not represent us. And that's kind of where we fall right now.
Okay. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, especially if nobody was wanting to give you the time of day because everybody had stuck on the narrative that you were vehemently arguing against and trying to show people that this is wrong, it's lies, and dragging a good woman's name, a woman's good name through the mud, etc. So completely makes sense that you would go through those stages. Now, what kind of like, would you say there has been any successes though? Because clearly you've had some struggles because of the people that you're trying to appeal to at first. But since you've gotten your footing and your mission statement pretty much down pack, like how has it been since then?
I would say that probably our biggest success, and it wasn't a whole success, but whenever we first launched, we were very, very dedicated to making sure that Abby Johnson did not have a speaking space at the National March for Life in January. She
Okay.
has spoken at the National March for Life, whether it be at the main event or at the rally for students the day before. She's
Mhm.
spoken there for the last 4 years. We're like, we need to make sure that they're not platforming this woman.
Sure.
She just nearly caused a rape survivor to kill herself. We don't want her
Right.
up on that stage. And we put a lot of pressure on the March for Life organization. Do not give her a speaking engagement. We told them straight up on social media, if you have her as a speaker, if you have her in a speaking slot, we will be there in the crowd and we are going to make a scene.
Okay.
And unfortunately, she was still recognized on stage. She didn't speak. She had a chair up on the stage and was recognized as one of the leaders of the pro-life movement.
Right.
And we did make issue with that. But I credit her not being given a speaker spot. It was confirmed that she was a speaker, and then she got taken off of that list.
Okay.
I would like to think that our following, as small as it was, had a huge part in that. Um, Ever since then, we've really, really hit a brick wall. She's
Mm.
had several speaking engagements. We have reached out to those organizations. We have given them all of our documentation of
Sure.
everything that she has done, and we don't hear back from them. They do
Right.
not care. They have no interest in it. Abby Johnson pulls in views, she pulls in money, and therefore they're going to utilize her.
Right. Yeah. Make as sad as it said, it's as sad it is to say, makes 100% sense from their perspective, right? Especially if no one believes an organization like yours or Jennifer at all that this was happening, or if they don't believe her at all at this point, they have no incentive to it. Now, you say that you believe that it was your part of your group's pressure that removed her as a speaker from this event. How did you go about getting that accomplished?
It was really a lot of activism on social media. We very, very much utilized social media platforms. We only had a few hundred followers, but whenever you have a
Okay.
few hundred people absolutely flooding all of your
Of
social media
course.
posts, it starts to get a little bit of attention. And then we got a hold of all of the emails for the event organizers. We spread that to our following, send them
Okay.
emails. We found a phone number, call them until they cannot get calls that are not you. Um, it was just putting pressure on them no matter where they turned, they weren't getting away from what we were trying to say.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like it would contribute to the success of that. Clearly, like, because if you have a lot of people think you need like tens of thousands of people to make any difference whatsoever. No, no, no. You need that many people if you don't have any, if like less than a tenth of them are dedicated to doing actual work. If you have 100 dedicated people doing actual work, you can get a lot accomplished. Like, don't think you need this huge organization.
I will say, all you need is 4 pissed off women to accomplish a lot of stuff. Our little team of 4 little women, like we have ruffled some feathers. We found out that, Abby Johnson has been claiming to be a licensed therapist for as long as she's been a pro-life activist. She's not a licensed therapist.
Of course
She
not.
is a biblical Christian counselor. She's a certified Christian
Ah,
counselor, but
yes.
she always calls herself a licensed therapist, and that actually goes against the ethical code for
You're
the
right.
certification board where she got her Christian counseling certification.
Mhm.
Um, we pissed them off enough, just the 4 of us, to where they like blocked all of our email addresses. Whenever we would get through to them via telephone,
Yeah,
they would abruptly hang up on us. Like they were not happy with us. It takes enough people being pissed off enough to just ruffle some feathers.
sure. Okay, that makes yeah. No, I completely agree with that. Like, I just wish more people would understand that because there's a lot of stuff that could change if you, like you said, get 4 pissed off women or 10 dudes. I guess I don't know whatever the actual ratio is for that. But so if you would want to like impart any words of wisdom to people that are just getting into activism just in general, right? Like I'm a say like baby 19-year-old, like if you could go back to 19-year-old K fellows and say, little girl, like this is what you got to do. Like what would you say?
Um, Don't adopt other people's beliefs as your own. Always challenge what you believe and why you believe it, because at the end of the day, you have to stand behind your opinions and nobody is going to stand behind them for you.
Oh, fair. It's good advice, honestly. And if somebody is like beyond the baby steps and they're like trying to set up an organization either similar to yours or we'll just say an ethical pro-life group, if they were trying to set up their own ethical pro-life group, not necessarily like one that are like, you're not doing this, but it's the best way I can get my mind around it, like certifying other pro-life groups to be like, they're actually ethical. Like we give them our stamp of approval. Like, what would you say to that person?
I think that my biggest piece of advice would be, if you want to start an ethical life organization, focus on your community. There are tons and tons of organizations, pro-life organizations, consistent life ethic organizations that are dedicated to this big net that is going across the entirety of the United States. Focus on what is happening in your backyard, the people that live around you, the people that are in need. There is always going to be, I don't care if you live in one of the richest places in the country, there is going to be somebody around you that is in need. So find the need and fill the need.
And so when you say like find the need and fill the need, are you talking like with goods and services, or just in general, find that like that niche that people need and like fill that, like, or both? Like it could be either.
All of it. Like, do you have a local soup kitchen? Volunteer. Homeless shelter?
Gotcha.
Volunteer. Go to your local thrift store and buy up a bunch of stuff that doesn't have holes in it and dedicate it to your battered women's shelter. Drop off a box of canned goods to your local food pantry.
Good.
Be there for the people that are not as privileged as you. And if you are also underprivileged, then you have a better understanding of what that need is.
Those are great words of advice. Like I can't say that enough. Like our friend Connor, like he's trying to do this himself, and it's just like, this is what we need more people to do, right? Left, right, center, I don't care who you are. Like there's a ton of holes that the government hasn't filled yet, that, sad to say, we got to do it sometimes. And hearing you say go over there and like, help other people is like, kudos, like 100%. So what we like to like wrap up with this on there is like, for like the final question before we like let you say your piece and go, like, if there was somebody on the other side of the debate, me for instance, and there's a really big misconception, and I'll say it because you've experienced this from both sides, of a pro-life activist, a very huge misconception that still exists for pro-life people that you distance yourself from, and for people that more are ethical pro-life like yourself. What's a misconception that people on the left generally have about both of these groups of people?
I think that being an ethical life activist, we've kind of coined that. That's kind of our thing. So it's very, very new. I think the only misconception that we currently have is that very few leftists that are like, like that's a neat little project. I think that you're secretly just pro-choicers, but that's cool. Like, I'm like, no, I'm very much pro-life, but I think the biggest misconception that a lot of pro-choice people have about pro-life activism in general is that we are all religious and we are all right-wing. The facet of progressive pro-life activism has been growing. Unfortunately, I did have to distance myself from that as well, but it does exist. And there are currently 21 million registered pro-life Democrats in the United States. This is definitely not something that the right can say is inherently theirs anymore. And the reality is that pro-life activism was never inherently the right's. Whenever pro-life activism first started back in the 60s, it was a bunch of progressive Catholics. And then the GOP stole it and did God knows what to it. But I think that's probably the biggest misconception. I find it funny because then people meet people like me and they're just like, you're a what now?
I don't understand. You don't fit in this box that I have a preconceived notion of what pro-life, ethical life is supposed to be. You're right?
Essentially, yeah. Like I have so many people, like whenever I go on to like debate them or I'm on a panel with them, they're just like looking at me like she's lying about something. This just doesn't make sense.
You have to be a dishonest actor if I don't understand you. All right. I'm glad that I could make you laugh with some of these jokes here. But before we close out, do you have any last things that you want to say?
I think that probably just gonna plug my organization one more time. Please follow us
Do
at
it.
PLEA Justice. We are trying to get our following a little bit bigger so that we can have a little bit more sway and a little bit more influence. And, it's been 7 months since the situation with Jennifer Christie happened, and we still have not seen even a hint of justice for
Mm,
her. And it doesn't matter what your stance is on abortion. This is a human rights issue. This is an ethical issue. We don't care what your stance is on abortion. We care about people that want to stand behind us and with us to get justice for someone that was horribly victimized. Her family was horribly victimized. So if you want to support us in the effort, we are absolutely 100% on board with you being there. We have a Discord server. It's for pro-life, pro-choice people. We have conversations about all kinds of political and social issues on there. Everybody is welcome. So please give us a follow on all of our social media platforms. We are at PLEA Justice on all of them.
all right. Great. Great. Be sure I will hit you up for the link later so I can for the Discord as well, so I can include it once this is fully published. But K-Fellows, thank you so much for joining us for our second episode of Praxis Run. This was great. I love these conversations, and I'm sure I will be in touch with you.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
No problem. Have a good night, K-Fellows.
You too.
Bye. All right, everybody. That was Praxis Run episode 2 with K-Fellows. Be sure to look up her organization, and we will be including the links on the recording for this. Everybody, that is our time today. So thank you very much for joining us on this show, and be sure to check us out next time. As we always say at Crowdsource Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.